Hi, folks. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight as we take some time to mark the 75th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima. I am very happy to be able to introduce our speaker and presenter this evening, Robert Horsting. Robert Horsting is an oral historian and an Emmy-awarded producer and documentary filmmaker. As a volunteer with the Go for Broke National Education Center's Hanashi Oral History Program, Robert has helped to record nearly 300 Japanese American World War II and Korean War veteran stories from across the United States since 2001. Along with artist and social activist Richard Yutaka Fukuhara, Robert has co-produced Shadows for Peace speaker forums featuring atomic bomb survivors, which we will see glimpses of this evening. Robert has also executive produced and directed the mixed arts stage production called Afternoon of Peace, honoring atomic bomb survivors. And working with photographer Shane Sato, Robert co-authored the coffee table books, The Go for Broke Spirit, Portraits of Courage, and The Go for Broke Spirit, Portraits of Legacy. So Robert, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we are so looking forward to hearing and seeing more of your work.
Hello, thank you for having me here today. I want to just extend my gratitude for this opportunity to really share these stories and with an audience that'll be new to me. So thank you so much. Oh.
And I think we'll go right to your video now, Robert.
Great. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I lost my cue. I forgot what I was supposed to do in this part. So the video you're about to see, it has a combination of historical footage as well as interviews with Hibakusha, small glimpses into their lives, the experience they had, as well as a little feature that's going to be kind of a surprise to you, and hopefully show people that we're not just looking at 75-year-old history. This is really something that has great relevance for all of us. So with that, let's see the video. Thank you very much. Hello, my name is Robert Horsting, the president of Shadows for Peace. As I think back over the 75 years that have passed since the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I'm so grateful to the Hibakusha for the courage it takes to share their story over and over, each time realizing that for them, they're reliving the past. I also have a concern that with the passing of their lives, we're going to lose the voices of the first-hand accounts of survival of what it's like to have an atomic weapon detonated overhead. These are really, really important, especially nowadays, because over 60% of our population is under 45. That means very few of them will have a direct connection to these stories, the story of loss of relatives, or knowing somebody who had a relative or friends there. The reason this is so critical, because if you don't have a connection to this history, you're not going to be too concerned about it unless there is some other means by which your attention is drawn to this, and it is critical for all of us.
August 6th, 1945, 2:45 a.m. The B-29 Superfortress, Enola Gay, piloted by Colonel Paul Tibbets, Jr., lifted off from Northfield, Tinian Island, the Marianas. Destination, 1,500 miles north to the city of Hiroshima, Japan. Near Iwo Jima, the Enola Gay met with two other B-29 superfortresses assigned to the mission. At 8:15 a.m., the Enola Gay released Little Boy, the 9,700-pound 235 uranium bomb. It exploded at approximately 1,900 feet directly over Shima Hospital, Hiroshima. The resulting mushroom cloud and shockwave was unlike anything these seasoned airmen had experienced during the entire war. August 9th, 1945, 3:49 a.m. The B-29 Superfortress, boxcar, piloted by Major Charles Sweeney, lifted off from Northfield, Tinian Island. Destination, Kokura, Kyushu, Japan. The B-29s proceeded to Kokura, which was socked in by cloud cover. Circling for some time but not able to identify their target, they headed to the secondary target, Nagasaki. At 11:02 a.m., boxcar released Fat Man.
B29, Bさんってこうused to call. For me, I didn't tell in front anybody, but I gave the nickname. Silver color beautiful airplane is just like an angel. So in Japanese, Ohayo Tenshi-san, I gave the nickname. Welcome, because never heard. Then why should you hate it? My friend and talking. B29 come inside. Good morning, angel. Then I look at, I said, all right. Airplane left on the Hiroshima Bay side. But I saw first time that day, beautiful blue sky. I saw white spot, one. Some people, they say 2 or 3, but to me, I saw only one. I look at, I don't think that the flyer. I wonder what is that. Then the friend said, what are you talking? Look at. And I point, that's on the east side. Then all of a sudden, not the sound, very beautiful light orange, very light orange color, beautiful. Then some part is a dark color. That's only 1 second. Just 1 second, but all of a sudden I know something wrong. So I try to cover like this because used to have a training. 4 finger covered eye, cover the ear, and safe on the ground. That's we used to training. So at least that much. Then I jumped to across street house, close to the front door. The bottom is a cement. So I jumped. After that, I was unconscious. But that time I didn't know. I broke my backbone. It's not broken, but the real injury. I hit so hard. But I never felt any pain. I don't know why. I never felt. A lot of people must be pain, a lot of people. Nobody never yell or crying or anything. Only I hear the children. I cannot forget one thing. I never forget that this children, about 25 children with the one teacher, must be try to take the student to countryside up to our house. I think the teacher is unable to move. And also children too. Mommy start crying. That's the only I hear the voice, crying voice, but a very weak mommy. The bomb drop, he didn't know because he was looking for vegetable to pull. That's why he doesn't look about. But when he realized his body was about 5 meters, so that much powerful flash. Then from there, he ran to come back to our house. But our house is halfway damaged, but in front, because inside the house, nobody can know that. So outside he came, then my mother and myself and other people in front. I remember, yarareta, yarareta. I'm hurt, I'm hurt. That's all. Then he told me to take care of some part, little bit blood, just a little bit blood, scratch type. Yeah. My mother was with my father in front of the bomb shelter. She's lying there. You cannot go in because, it's no place to go in. Then my father too, he could hear, I'm back. Oh, you're back. How's Shoto, the son? It's okay, Sumida-san. They are taking care. But I'm kind of worried, so I came back to see you. Then my father put the hands out. So I hold his hand. I'm back. I'm okay. My brother is okay. Then I know my father's hand is just like a boiling water. You put the tomato inside. Then when you took out, it's easy to peel, melt skin. Same thing. My mother's skin melt. Then I said, Daddy, you are burned.
Every day, at least one B-29 reconnaissance plane flew over and was probably taking a photograph. They blew air raid silent, but since they come to the top and go disappear, they call off right away. Same thing happened on August 6th. The bomb dropped. Same airplane came. I was in the classroom taking a calculus class, and the guy from the window side, same guy again, and it was past Hiroshima. So that was 8 o'clock in the morning, and a few minutes later, and the flashlights and heat came through the window side, and we were screaming, "Hey, what is this? A hot, 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 unbearable heat." And the screaming, "Hot, hot, what's the matter with this?" And also the light coming from, the old-fashioned photographer used magnesium. Boom. We thought someone accidentally ignited several, huge amount of magnesium outside. Even I couldn't see my fingers, I stood up a little bit and tried to balance in myself in the whole thing is white color, and tried to balance in myself, and with heat is coming up, and then pretty soon, I don't know why I did, but scared, and I gradually bent the knee and hit the floor. Then blast came, and when I was in that positions, the sound of the bomb came much later. The guy sitting in front of me got killed instantly. He didn't move. Well, I didn't know what he didn't move quick enough to the chairs, and he received all the wooden building, the heavy truss members. I think hit his head, crushed like a watermelon, and all his blood came to me when I was, down. So I was completely hair to all my summer white dress was real red color. Well, back to after the bomb dropped, dead quiet scene, people groaning or making a, sound, hey, hey, that type of thing. And it's still black. But I saw little tiny rectangle light down the end. That was the door to the classroom. So I got out at the door, stepping on lumber, and finally step out of the ground. I saw about 5 fellow classmates were looking, but the remainder is all stay in the class. First of all, only 5 of us got out first and look around once around which side is smoke coming out. And friend of mine all looking at me and funny expressions. And they told me, Namba, you got pretty bad, and you're not going to make it, because I was red all over, all blood. And so they says, since we don't have any first aid, any kit, but let me check where's your blood is coming out. Yeah. So they torn my shirt's sleeve and start wiping. Pretty soon they said, you know what? This is not your blood, because nowhere we can find the cut in your body. When I heard that, I was so happy. Oh, I'm alive. Finally went to the western side of the Hiroshima city. Around that time, heavy pitch black cloud create a heavy shower. I know the rain drip in a cartoon, they make it a little this shapes. It's almost like that, huge ones dropping like a waterfall over me. And my shirts, white shirts, they're like a gray color because it's a pitch black rain. And I was running under this rain. And since I was a pretty confident runner, even in high school, it's comfortable in summertime running on the rain. So I just kept running.
Kan. It's a kane. It's a bell. Airplane coming. Can see. That time we have to right away have to do action. So we are training. So I and my friend take down, and we go ditch. Then already sound, or B-29, I can. Then light, or like a white light, or anyway, strong light. So same time we jump in. My friend is more than younger than me, so always we have to protect. So I push him, and I cover, upper him. Then to king, those kind of very sharp sound. So we hear like this. Then how many minutes? I don't know. Couple of minutes or 5 minutes. I don't know. Anyway, I wake up, and like this, the all like dust. So I thought, near here, bomb. Because I never think that way. Then down, then my back brick. Yeah. So, that time I don't think of pain. Boom. Then I cannot find my shoes. Then go out the street. Then the small, like all Ishidatami, it's a sandstone, but I cannot see all dirt and the small grass, breaking in grass, and the dust. What happened? I thought. Then dangerous. So it's my friend. We are working very careful. Then many people scream and the kids' name and each other. Then I found my mother, worry us. Then she called my name and so I said, here, river, it's like so many people dead. So people, first time I didn't know, why river. But people said, 川にはたくさん人が死んでるよ。That means in the river, any kind of river, many people dead. So we saw, we know that people said already. So burn. So everybody want water. So go to the, went to river and drink and die. So many people dead. So we saw many small river, all same.
My grandmother went back to the kitchen to wash dishes. And she was facing the window, I guess, when the blast went off. Evidently, at that moment, Daewon exploded. Now, if you were standing miles away, you would definitely see the flash. And then some seconds later, you hear the boom. Since we were right underneath, I didn't see a flash. I didn't hear a boom. All I know is I was knocked out instantaneously, thrown maybe 10, 20 yards from where I was standing. All the structure was caved in. So I dug myself out. Luckily, I wasn't seriously hurt, bumps and bruises and stuff like that, but no fatal injuries. So I dug myself out, and things are beginning to burn by that time. I located my brother, who was coming from where he was standing. He had a slight burn on his forehead. And we said, where's grandmother? She was everything to us. She raised what was with us every day, every minute. Said, well, where's grandmother? She says, well, she's in the kitchen. And we could hear her screaming. So we got some people to help dig her.
Hello.
Funny expression.
It's a bell. Airplane coming.
In her body, dozens of places. Years later, these glass pieces of glasses work itself out, and she had a little jar where she would take it out and save it. And she had a pretty good sized jar full of broken glasses. My grandfather told my grandmother to get the kids out, go towards the mountain. He could see that maybe it wasn't so black towards the mountain. We were on the north side of Hiroshima, and the northwest of us was a small mountain range. And that area, it looked like it was, fairly clear. It wasn't burning. There was no smoke on that area. So he told my grandmother to take the kids and go in that direction. So my grandmother grabbed our hands and we walked to the main road adjacent to the river leading to this mountain. And when we got there, we saw all these people dragging themselves. It looked like you see a movie called The Zombie, The Walking Dead. All these people coming out from the inner city with tremendous injuries, broken bones, especially bad were the burns, where literally the clothes were burned off. Some of the prints are still embedded in their body, and you could see, some of the skin was dripping. It was really, really a horrific sight. There were many bodies on the road already in the various state of distortion. And so we got onto the main road and joined that group, and we walked towards adjacent to the river towards the mountain. And we could see soldiers stationed in various places. They said, "Gambale." Gambale means persevere. It's a famous word. Japanese use that quite often. And he said, "Don't drink the water." And I'm not sure why he said that, but found out later that the people who are seriously burned, when they were given a little sip of water, they will die right away. There were a number of cases where that happened. There were, I believe, some of the people, although I never saw it, I didn't want to. They were burning the bodies to mitigate future illnesses and so forth. The smell of burning flesh is something that sticks to my mind, even to this day. Several years ago, we went to India and we went to visit a cremation site. I remember while going there, I had a whiff of that smell, and all of a sudden, deja vu. I could see everything all over again. It brought back, bad memories.
For those that think the atomic bombs were just history and will never really be used, I'm sure a lot of people in Hawaii thought the same thing until a few years back when they received a text message warning them of an incoming missile and that they would have 30 minutes to impact. That brought history to life for many of them.
I was at a school, and we had middle school through high school kids there, hundreds of them. When the alert came in, our security decided that we weren't going to panic everybody because there's no way, if it was really a 20-minute thing, there's no way we could get kids home or with their parents. So we remained in place, we remained in buildings, and some of the kids knew because they were getting alerts through the phone.
I was here at my home with my son, his fiance, my 95-year-old mother, when we heard all our iPhones started beeping. And my son ran out and said, "Oh my God, Mom, there are missiles coming."
Both of my parents were alive during Pearl Harbor, and so I grew up knowing about Pearl Harbor. So when you think about that and the 1960s nuclear attacks and everything all the drills we were doing, it was very real. It was this is going to happen. And we had kids, we were on the mountain, so we had kids looking out to the ocean to wait for the missile to come.
And for a very split second, I felt a little bit of panic because the people I love so much in the whole world were right there with me, happened to be in my house at that time. And all of a sudden I felt a sense of peace. And I thought, actually what I said is, why don't we make some Bloody Marys?
After almost 30 minutes and it was over, there was so much anger. And then the parents came pouring in to get the kids. And there was so much grief. And I think those kids will never forget that day.
Wow. Thank you so much, Robert, for sharing that with us. It's a really powerful and frightening and emotional way to end.
Yeah, as sad as it was for them, I think what happened in Hawaii, that mistake really gave us a gift because it put us on alert. And I think, it's very easy to be complacent and not think of the lessons of history as being exactly that, a warning, to stay alert and realize that this can be repeated. And, Korea has been doing testing for years now, and they've proven with many, many presidents that, they're not, North Korea is not a country that you're going to rely on the word of that person to comply, to be tricked into anything they don't want to do. And so the idea that they threw these missiles over Japan, sent them out in that direction, and proved the range of how far they can actually deliver these things, it was really an alert for everybody. And those people in Hawaii are actually all probably hypersensitive, but they got the lesson that we need to also keep in mind.
Right. And I want to come back to that. And I think the lesson and the message that I want to hear from you about what you hope folks will take away from this. But I'm curious about what brought you to this project in the first place. How did Shadows for Peace begin, and what has the process been of building this, the oral histories and the talks and the speaker series?
A friend of mine, Richard Yutaka Fukuhara, he came to a film that I had done with Craig Yahata called Citizen Tunaway, and it told the story of Medal of Honor recipient Ted T. Tunaway, Tech Sergeant, the only Medal of Honor recipient from the city of Torrance, California. And it was told through the research of 8 students, 4 telling the story or researching Ted Tunaway's story, and 4 researching the story of what happened along the West Coast to Japanese Americans. And Richard did a lot of work, volunteer work with kids. And so he loved that film, and he adopted us basically and helped promote it. And, we talked a lot, we shared a lot of things in common. And in 2010, he saw a stream of a Hibakusha speaking from Japan, and it really affected him, it really hit home with him. And to realize that our view in America of World War II and the events of 2 bombings is always from above. We don't really hear everything that happened underneath. It's,
right.
Oh, the Enola Gay, the strength of the bombs, that type of thing. Oh, it ended the war. And so he became very intrigued with that concept. And in 2012, he shared with me, I had this dream. I want to show the events of the bombing through a modern dance. And who would think that? Richard, because he's very, very creative. And so, I started talking with him about his vision, and maybe we can incorporate these little snippets of an oral history, a quote or something that might be shown during the dance or whatever. Anyway, it started evolving that way. And he found a group, a dance troupe, to choreograph per his notes, and they did an amazing job, the Ken Dance Group. And so in 2017, we ended up putting on a stage show and filling that in with videos such as this and other performances. It just came together very nicely. We learned a lot. Allison De La Cruz really held our hands through a lot of that, and there was a huge learning curve. But we knew that we bit off a whole lot more. That had she not helped us, we may have fallen on our faces. But it was great, and Richard got to fulfill that dream, and we had hoped to reprise it based on the knowledge that we had gained through that. And unfortunately, in December of 2018, Richard passed away. But we knew that to honor him as well as the Hibakusha, that we wanted to reprise that, and we did February of this year. So that was very noteworthy and very fulfilling, and his family really appreciate that because in a sense it was his memorial.
Right. Wow. And I can imagine, just listening to some of those oral histories, it would be so moving to have a kind of art piece in between or throughout, to give some time to process, because that is the images that come to mind as you're listening to those stories are so vivid and horrifying, and you're, you know, watching these people relive or think through some of that past. So do you know why Richard chose dance as the medium to sort of mix in with these oral histories?
It really was inspired by a dream. When I said that, it was literal.
Literally a dream.
Yeah, he you know, it's
That's
kind of
awesome.
funny because both of us don't sleep a whole lot, and he would start writing. He'd be writing things. He'd send me a story, and then like be 2 or 3 in the morning, I'd see it. I'd start editing it and send some notes back to him. And that was our relationship. And he, amazing creative person, you know, and to fill that in and to bring in people that really also shared this kind of a vision and knew the importance of this. You know, ASA is the American Society of Hiroshima Nagasaki atomic bomb survivors. They're having an event actually on Sunday that I'm involved in too. So please look them up. They have a Facebook page. But, you know, other performers, Noritanian's Jazz Ensemble was one that had helped us out with a lot of these speaker forums. We're just really, really appreciative of the gift we've gotten by the people that, you know, joined our message.
Wow. And Robert, I want to talk a little bit about the oral histories themselves and the stories that you've collected, because I can imagine the challenge of asking some of these folks to relive maybe some of the worst memories or some of the most traumatic moments of their lives. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your process of conducting these oral histories, of asking these questions, and how you approach sort of these conversations and these relationships with these survivors. Because clearly they trust you and they trust the storytelling that you're doing. So I'm wondering, you know, what that process is like for you, has been like for you.
This is a combination, actually, you know, of trusting Richard, and then my being introduced, and to some extent, their comfort.
Mm-hmm.
But also, it's a combination of the fact that for many of them, they realize mortality is coming close. You know, if they don't share this message now, it's going to be lost, and none of us can afford that. And so a lot of luck that we found people willing to speak to us too, and share the story they have, so we can all benefit. You know, I think the other part of that is something that I feel very good about is when I interview people, it's not a one-shot thing. Thank you for telling your story. Goodbye.
Right.
And I try to, you know, maintain those relationships and keep in contact. It may not be often, but, you know, I'll come out of the blue and make a call and just check in on people. And I think because I do enjoy developing that relationship and keeping it open, it also opens the door for later on, and maybe even a referral that may be totally in an unrelated story. But yeah, I really enjoy hearing people's stories and hearing the history behind it, and getting their take. And for many of them, particularly the World War II and Korean War vets I've spoken with, many times it's the first time they've spoken public about these experiences. And so in that way, it's a gift for their families, because had it not been for this opportunity they were given, in that case was primarily the Gulf Broke National Education Center, but also with Shane and Shane Sato on the 2 books, opened up that opportunity again to do interviews with some people who had never interviewed. And so, yeah, we're able to share their stories in a way that maybe they couldn't do themselves.
Right. And I think something so powerful about oral history is that you're sort of facilitating telling their stories, but it's still in their own voices. And I think, especially for families, I can imagine that's such a gift. And to the, you know, survivors and the veterans that you're interviewing themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm on a loud street here, so we got a little background noise. That's great. So thinking about both the mixed media, the sort of dance and oral history performances that happened from sort of fulfilling Richard's dream, and then also this segment that you shared with us this evening, how do you approach telling this story? Like, what is kind of your thought process in what I can imagine you have so many of these oral histories and so many tidbits that you could include. How do you decide if you're showing, you know, a 25-minute clip, what parts of the story and how those parts are going to be told?
Actually, I look to give a story that can be, you know, clear, that gives some impact, that has a little bit of shock value, or to be quite blunt, I mean, you know, in some cases, people need to get grossed out with some of the detail to really make an impact, to make sure that they realize, no, this is scary stuff and it's real, you know, it happened. But I'm actually going to be switching these up now. There's other stories that I haven't incorporated, so I want to recut and get those in. Kaz Suya, she has actually another amazing story that's a little bit harder to pull out, right? But it's a really good story. And this is one about a teacher and children that were passing their house, and she saw them later in the day, and all of them had perished. You know, they didn't make it. I guess they were too close to the radiation. The other aspect of that too is that I guess when you're putting these stories together and you're looking for something that maybe no one has heard yet. Is this new to you? Is it something that maybe other people have heard, but it's new to you? Is it interesting? And can you put it together in a way that's cohesive? So I look for those type of things as well.
Wow. You have to know, you must know so many stories. You must know these oral histories in and out to be doing that kind of putting together.
I recently, through a friend who's actually on the Shadows for Peace board, Marilyn Yutani, a cousin, John Nishio, had sent a story of, I believe it's his aunt. She's actually on ground level, was the closest to the hypocenter. They had a camera shop. Her husband was in the doorway, got killed. She was badly burned and disfigured, and came out. You know, everything was pretty much gone except for these cement buildings there. Later on, she tried to get to the 5 miles out of town is where her family was on a farm. And these soldiers came by and took pity on her and brought her with them and dropped her off. But they had to move on. And when knocking on the door, her family couldn't recognize her. And they wouldn't let her in. They were scared. And so they left her out there. But they heard her cry. And something they heard, they recognized. And so they took her in. She became a speaker on this subject worldwide. And I'm sorry, I can't remember her name at the moment. I was looking for it earlier, but during the film. But yeah, you know, she really took that to heart, that she owed a debt. And the debt was to make sure that everybody knows the story.
Right. Wow. I'm thinking about, I'm sure you've seen this, but there's a clip from a 1950s like reality TV show basically called This Is Your Life.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen the Reverend Tanimoto clip where they have this reverend who I think was at Hiroshima, and they bring him on to sort of talk to him about his life and all he's lived through. And they bring out the pilot of the Enola Gay to apologize to him. I'll send you this clip afterwards if you haven't seen it, because it's, watching it now, maybe it was different, 60 years ago, but it's so disturbing to watch this like apology. And this man is on live television. So of course he's being gracious and he accepts this apology of sorts, but it's this disconnect, I think, that you're thinking about also with the above the bomb, below the bomb, sort of like, how could you ever apologize to someone for the way that, your actions, through the military have completely destroyed this person's home and so many of their loved ones. And it's really just so uncomfortable and jarring to watch. And I think important to also remember the difference between the American experience of these bombings and the experience of those who lived through it on the ground.
Actually bringing up an interesting point, and that is of the 4 people you saw in video, 3 of them are American born. So that, I think, is a misconception people have too. They think, oh, that happened in Japan and it happened to Japanese. We were at war with them. There were a lot of Americans there and that experienced this firsthand. And in fact, there was also an American air crew, 12 men who were POWs there. And did you see the footage of President Obama's visit to Hiroshima?
I don't think so.
Take a look at the news coverage, and there's a Japanese man who goes up to President Obama and gives him an embrace. This man took it upon himself to research the names of these 12 airmen and looked up the families to let them know what happened to their loved ones so that they weren't just MIA. They found out what actually occurred.
Wow.
So this is not just a Japanese national experience. There were a lot of Americans there that had family that were visiting or there to study and before returning home. To that end too, there are a lot of these families that were, or the relatives that were in America, many of them were in camps, hearing that this bomb landed. Now there's this turmoil, well, the war's over, our sons are coming home, our sons and daughters are coming home. But now not only do we have to try to put our lives together because we've lost mostly everything for most people, we've lost everything being placed in these camps, but what happened to our family? We can't do anything for them.
Right.
But, we need news. And the Red Cross was very, very instrumental in trying to contact and connect families in that way. Another thing that happened afterwards was Dr. James Yamazaki. He, in Los Angeles, was a very famous pediatrician. But as a young man, he was sent over to Nagasaki to set up a lab and a research project to study the effects of radiation on the unborn, the children that were in the womb at the time. And so with the help of doctors and a lot of midwives, they were able to assemble a lot of these women and see what the effects were on their children. And in fact, there's one of the Hibakusha I met, Tosh Kano, he was in his mother's womb at the time of her exposure. He was born without an immune system. Mumps is a once and done thing. He got it 7 times. Very, very weak until about 15 when his health kind of turned around. But he's got an amazing story as well. Yeah. So I just want to bring up one other thing with Dr. Yamazaki, and that is, the results of the study really opened the eyes and changed the way American medicine was done, because the findings, once they were published, actually ended up in regulations. If you were a doctor prior to the war and you could afford to get X-ray equipment, there were no guidelines. There were no restrictions on how much you could expose a patient. If in a sense, and I'm not accusing anybody,
right,
but if you had hypochondriac patients and they just wanted X-rays,
right,
you could get them in there every day. Or, since the guidelines were set, women who were pregnant could get multiple X-rays. And so this set up a structure. You need to be certified. And so that protected us all from that point on. And another thing along that line is that research, and this was done by a Japanese national that was collecting this information on his own when people from physicists from the Manhattan Project that went to Japan afterwards to do their research found this guy, and he determined very accurately that the level of radiation exposure, radioactive matter that fell to the earth, gave doses of 1.5 million times that deemed safe for an X-ray. That's a pretty healthy X-ray.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the after effects of that. Just amazing.
Yeah. What other kinds of stories about the aftermath do folks tend to tell when you're interviewing them or talking with them? Like, what happens to their families and their towns, and what are the weeks afterwards like?
Yeah, I think something that a lot of people don't realize is how much a pariah people will be deemed to be, because now they're looked on suspiciously. They have been exposed to this high amount of radiation.
Right.
What's going to happen to their children? You can't marry a hibakusha because your children might be deformed or whatever. Sadly, this is not something that is going to disappear with these people that survived the atomic bombs, because for these children and the families that were in these areas where we just had in 2010 the tsunami and the breakdown of the nuclear plant,
Right.
they're experiencing the same type of issue now. So that's kind of an untold thing, and sadly, that's one of the biggest aftermaths, and trying to gather what you can. One thing that is kind of on a very nice positive note, there's these hibaku trees. They're trees that survive the blast, and there's a lot of offspring. And there's a project that actually is planting these trees all over the world. There's one, I'm forgetting the name of the Japanese garden in Pasadena, but I was at a ceremony where they did plant one there. And so that's something that they're sharing all over the world, that, it is survivable. And,
Right. Survival and new growth, and
yeah,
as a form of memory. Wow. Robert, what have audience reactions been like when you've shown either clips of these interviews or to the full show that happened?
in a way, a lot of people don't approach us. One thing we were at Gardena Valley Japanese Community Center, Japanese Community Institute, and really kind of a nice thing was that there was a woman there with her mother. Her mother was a hibakusha, and that helped open communication. She said, her mom didn't really talk with her about these things. So hopefully for them, this opened the door that they can communicate more, that her mother seeing other people willing to speak, and that some of the details that she may not have been able to share were shared for her. And, a lot of people come that they didn't know. They didn't know a lot of this information. And, I didn't know a lot of this information. Really, Richard opened a door for me. So, and it's a real gift, because I've been able to meet so many amazing people as a result.
Yeah. And I think your work and the way that you talk about your work is such a tribute to Richard as well, which is a really nice piece. In addition to a lot of the, heavy emotional and emotional weight there. We have a question from Ken Mochizuki, so I want to make sure that we can ask our audience questions too. So Ken asks, as you know, some interview subjects are hard to connect with or to get talking. Do you have a particular approach to get these folks talking?
That opens up two stories. With Go for Broke, early on, two guys named Ted. Okay, the daughter brought them out from Utah. And while Ted Shimizu was very talkative and very friendly and casual, his friend was not. One-word answers. He's really, really difficult for me to interview. During a break, at that time we were shooting tape, and we had a 30-minute done, and we had a little changeover. Hey man, I'm looking at the rest of the crew. If you got any suggestions for me, give it to me. So that was one that was just really tough. In other cases, I tried to do a pre-interview. I think it's really useful. Don't do a cold interview. Establish a little bit of rapport. Find, hey, did you guys run track? Did you both run track? Or do you both like sports or food or whatever? Find a means at which to communicate that's casual and that you can create some bond, so that it's not a cold interview. And that, there's some familiarity, you build a rapport. And I think that's a big part of it. A little bit further, if you're trying to interview a family member, you really need to take a careful look. Are you the right person for this? Because of the dynamics, not that they don't trust you, it's the dynamics in the relationship. Do you have that open means of communication, or is that going to be difficult? now actually generationally, something that's kind of a gift for a lot of senseis. And if you're not Japanese American, hearing this, sensei's a third generation, Nisei's second generation. The dynamic between those two generations, there was not a whole lot of communication unless you had a really rare parent. And so I think, although that information didn't cross over between those two generations a lot, grandparents do start opening up when their grandchildren start asking them. And so I urge you to make that consideration too. Maybe your children are the ones to ask your parents those questions, And likewise, I want to put a little responsibility on those grandchildren that, you can be the bridge to open the communication for your parents and your grandparents. And, there's a lot of history lost if you don't ask.
Yeah. So on that same note, Robert, what kind of advice can you give to folks watching along who might want to continue or begin conducting some of this oral history work, maybe in their own families or in their own communities, or even beyond that? Like how to get started and ask some of these questions or set up some of these interviews?
Yeah, I would be happy to have my email posted and provided, and if I can help some people with that, fine. But find a topic you're interested in. Do it because you love the topic, because then your passion will come out in that. And when people see your passion, they are more drawn to tell their story. That the gift they hold is worth sharing with you, because you seem to have a really true interest in the information. And it's not just, I'm going to write a paper for school and then hopefully I'll get a good grade and I'm done. So, I think that's a big part of it. When you see interviews on TV or hear them on the radio, hey, if you like that person's style, study them. See what they do, what kind of questions they ask, and really don't think passively, but what would you have asked if you had that opportunity to do that interview? What do you think that person didn't ask that you wanted to hear? And that doesn't mean that they did a bad job. It's just you have your own thought and influences. And so what informed question would you have asked? So I think there's a lot of routes to developing yourself in that way as well.
That's a great piece of advice. That's awesome. And Robert, we're almost out of time. So I want to ask one last question, which is, what kind of message or lesson or thoughts do you hope that your audiences for Shadows for Peace come away with? Or, what kind of message are you hoping to get out with this work?
One, to really pay attention, like I said, to the lessons that are here. The Hibakusha are many of them in their 90s, 80s. The young ones are in their 70s. So it's important that they're making good use of their time to share this information. It's important for us to listen. And it's not enough just to listen. We need to act as well, because Tosh Kano shared with me that there's research going on right now at some of the highest level universities in nanotechnologies. And people are using these technologies to miniaturize the delivery systems and even the bombs. And one of the thoughts is, we can have surgical strikes, and we don't have to use this big. Well, that's not going to happen. Get serious. A surgical strike, that radioactive material is going to go in the atmosphere. And do you think it's going to be one bomb? No, somebody's going to respond in kind. Right. And if they don't have those smaller delivery systems, they're going to use the ones they have. And these are many, many hundreds of times stronger than what was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So, any break in nuclear warfare, there won't be any winners, because it's going to affect us all around the world, just in varying degrees. Right. So please contact your legislators, those leaders in places that can make these decisions, and to let them know you don't want this. I think if we have a moment.
Oh yeah.
I one thing always made me laugh back when Jesse Jackson was running for president. I didn't really think he had a chance, but he was bringing up points. And one of the points that made me smile was he said, America is not necessarily making what people want. How many people have a microwave? And apparently you did a count of hands, and a lot of people were raising their hands. How many of you have a nuclear bomb? Of course, nobody raised it. See, we're building the things people don't want.
It's good to end with a laugh. Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Robert. And thank you for the work that you're doing to share these stories and bring, make clear how close this history is and how it continues both, to be something we really need to pay attention to, but then also the way that these stories and the very real impacts of this history of these two bombings continues to impact us today. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. I will follow up with you and make sure we can share with folks how else they can stay in touch with the Shadows for Peace Project and with you. But thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who tuned in on this Thursday evening.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your time with us. And Aaron, thank you so much for this opportunity. Are you going to serenade us out?
Say that again?
Are you going to serenade us out? Because I met you as part of No Voice.
Out. No. No,
Oh,
but actually that's a good reminder. On a much lighter note, we do have a karaoke gathering on Friday evening called Karaoke with Kanji. I think that's what we're calling it. So if you'd like to join, Robert, if anyone watching along would like to join, there will be lots of singing.
You realize by inviting, you may clear out the room.
I know.
Or a lot of disconnected computers.
I'll go at the end when everyone's tired. Anyways, thank you so much, Robert. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.